Hey, what's up there, YouTubers? It's me again, Brian, aka Gamer55551, and I am back with a video review. And for this review, I'm going to be taking a look at Final Fantasy 16, the latest entry into the Final Fantasy series for the PS5. This is exclusive for it, though, although I do believe it is coming to the PC and all. And for anybody who's interested in any gameplay footage, I'll have a link down in the description down below. Assuming you're watching this on YouTube, or you click on the card that will appear up on this video. And for parents out there, it's worth pointing out that Final Fantasy 16 is rated M for mature audiences only, ages I believe 17 and up by the, or 16 and up by the ESRB rating system. In terms of the Final Fantasy series, though, originally the series got its start on the NES and then coming to the Super NES, but the series has been mostly, not completely, but mostly been home onto the PlayStation systems, though. And we've seen, for a lot of people, when they think of Final Fantasy, they think of PlayStation. The series has also made an appearance on other systems as well, including on Xbox and everything like that, but it's mostly been home onto the PlayStation brand and all. So when they announced that Final Fantasy 16 was in development, I was kind of curious to see what kind of direction they were going to go with this one. And this one certainly, well, there were certainly some decisions some people may or may not like in terms of the direction they went with Final Fantasy 16. But after spending some time with the game, I will say that I definitely enjoy it, though, but it depends on the type of game you're into or not. Some folks are going to like the direction they went with Final Fantasy 16. Some folks may not like the direction they went with Final Fantasy 16, though. So we'll break it down into pros and cons, and we'll start off first with the pro. And the first one has to do with the combat. Now, for me, a lot of people have liked to refer to the combat as being close to sort of like Devil May Cry or Bayonetta to a certain degree, and I will say that is basically true, though, to a certain extent, though. If you've played those games before, like Devil May Cry or the Bayonetta series in general, you're probably going to feel right at home with this one, though. I mean, you have one attack for your sword, and then you also have another one to shoot out, different powers, depending on which of the summons you get during, like, when you complete some of the battles. So depends on really, but the broad consent is that it's very close to the Devil May Cry and Bayonetta gameplay setting, though, and that certainly isn't a bad thing, since I like those type of gameplays and everything like that. The game also has, quests and everything like that. Most of the quests I've done have been somewhat close to mostly like a fetch quest and all, though. There are some interesting ones, to be exact, though. But those who enjoy, the Devil May Cry and Bayonetta gameplay will probably enjoy this game and everything like that. The next thing is that basically is the story, though. Now, for some, the story, a lot of people have compared it to sort of Game of Thrones to a certain extent, and to some degree that is true, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, though. This is mostly because this game is sort of M-rated compared to past entries into the Final Fantasy series, which has been mostly T-rated, though. And while the story is Game of Thrones, I wouldn't exactly call it like edgy Game of Thrones or full-on Game of Thrones, to be exact. Yes, there are some elements in the story where it does come off very close to what you would see in, the classic HBO Max, or now Max TV show Game of Thrones, but I would stop short and fully calling it that completely, because just finished watching the first season of Game of Thrones and all. The thing is, Game of Thrones, at least in my view, is more like a soft porn show compared to what Final Fantasy 16 is. I mean, yes, you do have some fan service, some nudity here and there, but I wouldn't exactly put it on the same level as, say, what Game of Thrones is, to be exact. But still, if you like the Game of Thrones like story in Final Fantasy 16, you'll probably enjoy it for what it is, especially if you enjoy Game of Thrones and everything like that. And last but not least, I will say, visually speaking, for the game on the PS5, it looks pretty good. Some of the visuals definitely look nice, including some of the epic battles when Clive will turn into Ithaca and take on, some of the other dominants in in the game and everything like that. So it definitely looks really nice, and the game does pretty much run well. You do have the option to play it in both graphics mode or performance mode. I've been playing on performance mode though, and it has run pretty well on the PS5. Basically, especially in combat though, it runs perfectly fine even with performance mode on. So in terms of visuals, it looks great on the PS5, and it runs well based on my time with it on the PS5 and all. Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we'll get to part 2, which is the con. So we'll take a little break, and we will be right back. Okay, and we are back with part 2 of my video review of Final Fantasy 16. So now that I gave you the pros, why don't we get started with the cons though? And the first part of the cons I do want to talk about is the performance issues in the game. Now, as I mentioned in the pro, I thought the game ran pretty well on the PS5, and I still stand behind that. For the majority of the time, the game was running perfectly fine, especially in the combat side where I was able to do what I need to do. I didn't see anything that ruined the experience in terms of combat. But there has been some talks about how when you're out of combat, how the performance has some issues though, and I kind of can see that to a certain degree. Basically, there are some issues where the game the frame rate isn't as smooth as it would be if you were basically in the combat side. On the combat side, this frame rate is fine, but when wandering around the area and so forth, it really isn't though, so it's a little bit unfortunate. Maybe we'll see an update and they'll fix that though, but for right now, there are some performance issues, but it's been mostly, at least based on my time with it, mostly been when you're just moving around and all, and not really with any other combat. The next thing I want to do is talk about, and this is coming back to the combat. Now, as I mentioned, I talked about the Devil May Cry and Bayonetta-like combat, and I thought that certainly wasn't a bad thing. As I mentioned, I like that kind of style of gameplay, and I still stand behind that, though. That said, I can see why not everyone is going to be a fan of the action approach that they basically took, compared to past Final Fantasy games where some of them took, like the turn-based style of approach though. So the combat, I think, is probably going to be the controversial part, at least in my view, and some folks are going to like this action approach. Some folks will rather prefer the turn-based type of approach. So it really comes down to your preference and taste. I certainly don't have a problem with it being, the action approach though, but I can understand long-time Final Fantasy fans and long-time RPG fans who would prefer, the classic, turn-based combat approach that the game series was well known for in the beginning. So, depending on your view, either you're going to like the combat, or you may hate the combat in general. And last but certainly not least, though, is that it seems to be, based on my time with the game, Clive is really the only character you can really control in the game, though. The other characters are basically controlled by, the AI, the computer, and everything like that. Toga the dog, on the other hand, you do have some abilities and commands, but you could also put on a joy where you don't have to make those commands. You could have the game make the command itself, though. I mean, this is both kind of good and bad. It's good because it means you don't have to worry about your other companions, but at the same time, it's kind of bad because you want to see how the other characters play and everything like that. So it's a little bit unfortunate you're not going to be able to control any of the other characters and all. So, again, this is both kind of a good and a bad thing in a way. Great that you control only one character, but somewhat unfortunate you don't have the ability to control like the other characters, like Sid or Jill or anything like that. Overall, I would say Final Fantasy 16 is a fun exclusive for the PS5, and I definitely enjoyed it, but I can understand how this game may or may not appeal to some folks depending on some of the decisions they made in this game. At its best, though, the combat is enjoyable if you like the Devil May Cry Bayonetta type of approach. The story is good, especially if you're a fan of, say, Game of Thrones, since there is a little bit of Game of Thrones 5 to the game, though. And the visuals, the game looks really good on the PS5, and for the majority of the time, the game did ran well based on my time with the game, though. At its worst, however, though, there are some performance issues. I didn't notice it in the combat, but as I mentioned, I noticed it when you're just moving around in the world and everything like that. The combat, I can understand not everyone is going to agree with the action approach, as they may prefer the turn-based approach to the gameplay, though. And to have the only ability to control Clive may not appeal to everybody. I mean, I didn't have a really big problem with it, and it's nice that you can only control one character, but at the same time, I do admit it would have been nice to try out some of the other characters like Jill or Sid and try them out as well. But in either case, I do think this is a fun game, though. It may not be the Final Fantasy game everybody wants, though. It may not be the type they wanted, no, but for action fans, this is not a bad title, though, especially if you're fans of Devil May Cry and Bayonetta. What this means for, say, something like Final Fantasy 17 going forward remains to be seen. It'll be interesting if they continue with the action approach, or if they scale it back and go back to more of the turn-based RPG kind of approach. So we'll see over time how it is, though. But still, action fans should at least consider taking a look at Final Fantasy 16 and all. Okay, this concludes my video review of Final Fantasy 16 for the PS5. And again, these are my opinion. What are yours? What are your thoughts about Final Fantasy 16, though? Do you agree with this approach to going an action approach, or do you prefer they went back to sort of a turn-based approach, though? Do you like the fact that this is an M-rated game and went more, the story being more closer to Game of Thrones? Did you thought the game ran well on the PS5? Are you playing it in quality mode or performance mode? Do you agree with what I said in this video? Do you disagree? Do you have a difference of opinion? As always, sound off in the comment section below. Let me know what you think. And if you do like this video, I hope you hit the like button. I would appreciate it. And I hope you do subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you do, make sure you hit the bell icon for notifications of any new videos I put up. Also, feel free to share this video if you want to, and feel free to donate to my channel if you like. You can do it through PayPal me, or Patreon, or Steam Labs. Links will be in the description of this video, assuming you're watching this on YouTube. And I will see you again next time when I do another video. Hopefully that'll be soon. Until then, from Southern California, I wish you all a good day then. Bye!